and other various groups within Washington, and it was a sort of retroactive justification for what occurred. As to the NSA leaks, again, there were so many investigations going back and forth. I mean, the stuff is basically hard to script, but it appears that the reportedly at the zenith of this showdown, either Hegseth or his whip hand, this person, Chief of Staff Casper, ordered or at least consulted with the National Security Agency to wiretap purportedly the rivals within the Pentagon, which again, for all of the arguments that are being made here, that essentially that these leakers were leaking against President Trump, no evidence of that. It appears that several White House officials now believe that wasn't true. And then secondly, that they were fighting the so-called deep state, meanwhile calling up, I mean, if anything is the deep state, is the National Security Agency of Snowden fame.
Yes.
I mean, it is just putting rich the explanation that is going on here. And I think the brass tacks is, look, it's the president's decision, but you have somebody in charge of the Pentagon who, perhaps not terribly surprisingly, is not up to the job.
What do you think, Kurt, that this moment reveals about some possible internal fractures within the Trump administration?
Well, sure. I mean, I think, well, it's interesting because the Pentagon Gate itself occurred before this sort of warp speed month in which Trump has pivoted on Middle East policy. So Pentagon Gate was the sort of side scandal or the parallel scandal to Signal Gate. And of course, Signal Gate was ushered in by former NSA Mike Waltz, or at the time NSA Mike Waltz, and Hegseth was also involved. And the reality is, if there hadn't been strikes on the Houthi rebels in Yemen, which, in my view, were wholly elective and at the service of a foreign power, there wouldn't have been any of these scandals. I mean, it's a counterfactual, but it's hard to prove. The Yemen panic caused both the ouster of Waltz and may yet cause the ouster of Hegseth. Meanwhile, in the last 28 days since May 1, since Waltz's ouster, you have seen the effective. I mean, look, he's Secretary of Defense, but he's heading to Singapore today. What particularly is going on in Singapore? Maybe a huge China fight's about to happen and we don't know about. But all of the action is in Europe, in the Middle East right now, and I think you have effectively a sideline Secretary of Defense. As to the ideological combat that is going on, I think it's interesting. I think to an extent, rhetorically, this administration has been all on the same page. I mean, even Waltz spoke about the need to end the Russia-Ukraine war, but behind the scenes, you have this sort of remaining old guard who are increasingly being flushed out. Rubio reorganized the National Security Council over the weekend, but there's still the blob within Washington D.C. And I hesitate to use that term because it's a little too all-encompassing. But there are these retro con inc, neoconservative establishment organs that still want to impress its will on this administration. Probably most prominently the Wall Street Journal editorial board, which again is wailing today about the course the White House is taking.
You mentioned the events over the course of the last month, which have been very dramatic in terms of Trump really leaning into this, again, non-interventionist or whatever you want to call it, ideology with respect to Middle East policies and so on. Do you think neoconservatives who still exist in the administration, I mean, I don't know, is Rubio still one of them? He, as recently as 2 years ago, he was, I think, having the exact same ideological views that he's had for years and for even decades, but now he's being viewed as one of the more successful operators within the Trump administration. And Trump obviously doesn't operate primarily on the level of ideology, right? He has other considerations, and ideology is kind of a background. I suspect J.D. Vance operates on a slightly more ideological level, at least. Do you think they're like biding their time and they think, that some Trump people will burn? I mean, Hegseth himself is one of the more scandal-plagued members of the administration. He could go be replaced by someone who also looks good on TV and has a totally different ideology, and then they'll be back in power.
My only slight critique is I do think Trump is fairly ideological. I mean, the moves we've seen the last 28 days, the zeal to end both wars. These are not things that a president would do if he wanted to coast. Just rewind. January 2025, he has, basically all the Silicon Valley oligarchs in the front row. He's on top of the world. He's recovered from, nearly 100 indictments, 10 years of a political circus, the horror of 2020 and 2021. And, he could have just done a coast center-right administration where he cut taxes and, bombed Iranian nuclear sites. This is not what he's trying to do. So clearly he believes in stuff. I mean, the people around him talk about the L word, which is that he's increasingly and has been for years talking about his legacy. So I just push back a little bit on that. Obviously, Vance was a selection of a sort of true believer, a clear olive branch to the so-called new right. That's not in dispute. As to the other ones you flagged, I mean, look, I think Rubio himself has done a bit of an ideological volte-face that's not really in dispute. But I think he is a very effective operator, and as you said, and he's very, very competent. What he actually believes, I'm not sure how relevant it is at this particular juncture because he has staffed a State Department that is teeming with this kind of perspective, and I think that's 90% of the way there and being relevant to what we're discussing. As to the other players, again, I think they are careers that are in mid-level positions that don't have as high a profile, but more importantly, I think they're the organs of conservative Inc. The Wall Street Journal editorial board, what remains of National Review, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and most notably the Senate GOP. Congress still exists, and they are trying to remind the president of that. But I think it is a showdown. They are not going to win.
And we'll have to stay on top of this. Kurt Mills, thank you so much. British journalist Tommy Robinson walks free from prison and thanks Elon Musk for his early release. That's next.